Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Right now I'm working on a series called Taking Control, and I find it very important and imperative at this time that we are focusing on the things that we can control as opposed to focusing on so many things that are going on in the world that unfortunately we can't control. So where our focus lies really ties in with decisions that we're making for ourselves, mentally, physically, all that sort of stuff. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Michele Dionne, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. And I'm involved in a lot of things in the community. I'm involved in, I work for WW Weight Watchers as a wellness coach, but I also teach law of attraction. I do meditation classes. I have a personal mission to uplift and inspire pretty much anybody who crosses my path. And I feel that's what motivates me, and that ties in with my personal purpose in life. So I was inspired to put this series together so that we collectively can have a conversation about food, fitness, fulfillment, all the things that are going to help us get through this together, be better people and persons, so that we can learn as we go and feel like we have the tools to get through this and to come out on the other side. Because let's be realistic, at some point, we're all going to be able to come out of this together, and we need to make sure that we have the tools that we need to break through, right? And that's the thing, it's all going to open up at some point. So I'm very pleased to share with you that my special guest for this episode is Brian White, who's very well known to the community. So I'd like to introduce him now. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's actually a really fun idea. And obviously, I appreciate everything that you do for the community as well. And your messages through all of this have been very positive. And, I think that's a good part of what it takes for everybody, is to have folks like you who are willing to do this and speak out and just be an example. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. And you know what? Together we're better, right? And that's the thing. I'm so blessed to have a group of people that I could draw from to do this sort of thing to help the community. So as we start into this, Brian, would you like to give us a little bit of history about yourself? And I know you've been involved in different, like you're involved with the St. Clair Child and Youth, right? At one point. So can we talk about that and your own history and passions a little bit?
Sure. Well, most people know I'm an elected member of Sarnia City Council and Lambton County Council, but those tend to be hats that I wear sort of sideways, right? Like my toque. It's a privilege to have those positions and to represent the experiences that I have. But I really am all of my experiences first and foremost without those titles. So I like to make that distinction. I didn't get into politics to be a politician. I got into politics because I have experiences that I thought weren't reflected in those who were making decisions at the time. I'm a dad of 2 kids. I'm a husband. I have 2 cats and a dog. I am an alcoholic in recovery who with 10 years of sobriety next week. And yeah, so it's kind of exciting to look back on those milestones and to think how important having a second chance at life has been for me personally. And of course, as a result of that, I tend to believe that I'm living my best life now, and I'm living it to be of service to others. My kids in particular have some very unique challenges that led me into wanting to become a board member at St. Clair Child and Youth Services early on. In that journey. I joined the board, about 9 years ago, just wrapping up my final year in a couple of months. So it'll be an interesting way to go out, but I did serve as board president for 6 years and remained on the board as past president for the past couple. And, it's been a great experience in itself. I'm also the chair of the Family Advisory Committee at CPRI. CPRI is based in London, but it is the only institution directly run by what used to be the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, and now it's a combined effort with justice, youth justice, and it falls now nested inside the Ministry of Health and long-term care now. But CPRI is a tertiary facility that will do diagnosis and analysis of more severe cases, which was the case for my daughter. So my daughter ended up spending 3 months there, as well as having service over a number of years, and my son as well, as a complicated case. So I've got lots of experience with the system as well, and with a group of men, we started an organization, or we'll call it right now a little coalition of male leaders to support the work that the Sexual Assault Survivors Center and Women's Interval Home does. And we're called the Male Ally Coalition. And we're still very informal. We still very much meet in a setting with no leadership per se, just as a group of equals who work alongside and try and figure out how best we can support that work and bringing that male perspective and perhaps influence to the community. So there's a lot of things out there to do, but as I say, primarily my main job, especially through all of this, is to be a full-time father to 2 kids that are uniquely challenged, and of course now we don't have access to all of the resources in the community, so it's sort of become my first my first priority every day. And my wife actually happens to be away for 4 months at a healthcare center as well, which oddly enough, admission started the same weekend that everything basically locked down. So for the past 4 weeks and for the next 3 months, I will be on this journey alone in my home with my 2 kids too. So it's a unique situation, but these are the experiences that make me who I am, and this is why things like this matter to me. And I also appreciate my privilege in that I've been blessed with this opportunity to grow in a second life, I suppose, and to learn things and to understand the system and to try and be a voice for people who are mired in all of this stuff that, quite frankly, I'm still often in the middle of myself. But still somehow manage to have the support and strength to be able to get through it. So,
wow, that is a lot more details than I could ever put under your name. Hey.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I don't know if I shrugged my shoulders or rolled my eyes when you asked, but I just thought, oh, okay, let's see what happens when I just start, because I don't know where it's going to go.
That's awesome. And you know what, though, I really believe everything happens for a reason, and there's no coincidences. So your journey and your path has given you these skills and tools that you can share moving forward, right? So, that's a positive that you can find out of the whole thing, but it also validates that you're going through a lot of those same struggles as other people right now. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is people who are struggling with addiction, whether it's they're already in recovery, or trying to stay on that path, or maybe they're having those aha moments now, realizing that maybe they should be in recovery. Maybe it's an opportunity to realize, like they say, the alcohol sales have spiked ever since this all started. So, I mean, look at the person who is a casual drinker before, maybe just recreationally, and then now they have a full-blown, they feel like they're on vacation mentality, where they're just barreling through the alcohol just to, avoid the day-to-day, or sometimes we go down that path because we don't want to deal with the real stuff that's going on the inside. So what would your recommendations be for any of those scenarios?
Yeah, it's definitely a unique situation. It's very, very tough. And again, I feel very grateful that I have, the strength of my recovery, and I have people from, my 12-step program that have checked in with me. And likewise, I've checked in, and I try and keep, a close eye on, especially the ones that I feel are maybe a little bit more on the margins. But as you say, there are plenty out there who may be realizing for the first time that perhaps there's more to it than what they thought was just casual weekend partying, or you know, maybe even not partying, because I don't even remember if I was ever a partier. I just drank, you know, and I drank because I had scars and wounds that I wanted to cover up and not deal with from my childhood and from the other things that I did to myself later in life as a result of, you know, the addiction. So uh, it's not easy, that's for sure. Right now, it's not easy to um, be able to recognize anytime that you've got an issue, but it's also not easy to get the level of support that we're used to having. You know, I was very blessed to walk into a meeting and not ever have to have a drink again after that, but I must have quit probably 5,000 times before that day because I knew, right? So, and I don't exaggerate when I say that. I must have quit 7, 8 times a day, even after I had my last drink for the first while, because as the cravings and temptations crept into my mind, I'd have to reaffirm that I was not going to have a drink for that day. So I have a lot of concern as to how it's affecting people right now. People that are in recovery already are and might be used to meetings, if that's the method that they use to get sober and stay sober. They do have access to some online options right now. It's not the same. There's no doubt about it. It's not the same. And it's only a month into this. I'm very sympathetic to how that must be affecting people. But if you want to get sober right now, man, I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I can imagine it would be a very, very difficult time to want to do that, because that in-person human connection meant so much to me. That the handshakes and the hugs, the eye-to-eye, face-to-face contact, the ability to sit in a room and just put my head down and cry while other people told my story, because that's where you find all that, you know, connection, is when you start hearing other people. In my opinion, my experience, everything I say is through my experience, is that I would find that connection in hearing other people telling their stories, and so much would relate to what I've gone through, either the experiences themselves or the feelings. So I would hope that in anybody's life, and even if you don't think that you know of anybody off the top of your head, that you could search within yourself to find somebody that you can reach out to ask for help. And if you can't, you can certainly call the hotlines. You can certainly call the hospital and ask if there are any beds available for detox. You can certainly call, you know, the AA number, the NA number, ask for an online meeting, ask for somebody to call you and have a one-on-one conversation on the phone. There are options out there, but it's just a little trickier now than it was before.
Right, right. Well, and I have to say, and you know, Sarnia Lambton is my community, so this is what I'm basing it on. But here, the group of support for people who I know who are recovering from, whether it's alcohol or drug addiction, as soon as they put a shout out like on social media that I'm struggling or I'm having a good time or I'm having a hard time, the people that rally around them is absolutely amazing and so uplifting. Just, hey, here's my number, call me right now. Hey, what are you doing? Giving them tips, giving them, you know, support, and knowing that, you know, one day at a time, right? That is so powerful. So even if, you know, it's a matter of thinking who you have in your circle who has gone through something similar, just even as a starting point, don't you think, Brian?
Yeah, again, it's hard to do. It's hard to open up and to trust somebody, but it really is I think the first step in saving your own life. But that's what it comes down to. It comes down to recognizing that the power to save your life has to come from within, and most people don't believe that. There is a higher power involved. There is an energy, and you can define that however you want. Some people call it God. Some people call it Allah. Some people call it the Creator. Some people call it the light bulb, you know, that's literally screwed into the socket in the ceiling, shining a light down upon you that allows you to not be in the dark just for a brief moment. But whatever it is that you define as a power that's greater than you, that's outside of you, you have to kind of recognize that in order to tap into that, you've got to have some kind of human connection. You've got to be able to reach out and take somebody's hand and recognize that your best thinking and your best efforts led you to that exact moment where you're sitting there wondering what the heck I'm going to do. Because I know for myself, as I said, if I quit 5,000 times over the space of, I don't know, 10 years of recognizing that I was in deep, then I also have to recognize that I can't do it without help, with it, because I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. So I think that's an important recognition for people, is to, and as I said, and as you said, like, find somebody in your circle, and you might not even be that close. And maybe that's what's comforting to you, is to find somebody that doesn't know you that personally, that you can reach out to and say, hey, you know what? I know we don't know each other well, but I've got to ask you, can you help me? Or can I just share something with you? And more often than not, I mean, I can't think of any experiences off the top of my head that something like that went badly for somebody. Certainly didn't make it worse.
Right, exactly. And that's where being brave matters, right? Being brave matters. And I think, you know, when you start looking at that self-reflection, and let's be honest, a lot of times we are, because you're hurting yourself whenever you're, you know, over consuming anything. So a lot of times there's childhood trauma involved, there's limiting beliefs involved, maybe it's generational dysfunction of one sort or another. And I think the other thing that we need to look at is, you know, you've got the scenario of the individual by themselves that's drinking and drinking and drinking, but then let's bump it over to the family scenario. So now maybe, and I'm reading a lot of this online, and people, like articles, but also people sharing their stories about the domestic abuse that's going on right now, whether it's verbal or physical. So a lot of times alcohol might be part of that, drugs might be part of that, or just the fact that people are scared. Just the fact that, you know, you haven't, like, you take the dynamics of the small family who mom and dad for the last, you know, their whole relationship together, they've been working their program. So mom, you know, she has her job, and then she drops the kids off, and then the dad does his part, and they have a couple hours together a day. Maybe on Tuesday, Billy's got soccer, and Thursday, Billy's got taekwondo and whatever. And then now all of a sudden, oh, we're at home 24/7. Oh, I don't know why that teacher had so much trouble with Billy. Now I know why, right? So you take those dynamics, and there's the families that are loving it, and the child that's learning dad jokes, and, you know, all those good positive connections. But then we have a lot of scenarios right now where the family unit is breaking down a little bit. They're struggling. So I think it's important that we share with those families, and, you know, it's males as well as it is females, that there's, you know, again, whether it's verbally or physically abusive. Like, I think about, you know, if I was stuck in self-isolation with at least one of my exes, it would not be going well right now. And that really, you know, makes me think just very deeply, and send a lot of love out into the universe to all those families. So I think it's important that we reflect a little bit on that. The women's interval home is still open. They're still taking calls and taking people, right? What about like the River City Vineyard? What do you know about that sort of stuff, Brian, to give people some hope and direction of what they can do?
Well, again, as you say, that there are still options out there, and even though it's changed a little bit how it works, you do have to, again, find some way to recognize that if it's the right time to reach out for help, then you've got to reach out for help, and you can still call all of the same numbers. You'll still be offered service of some form. I don't have the answers as to what every organization is doing right now. I'm sure, like you, I hear one thing, I read one thing, I go down the rabbit hole, and I understand how that works. But meanwhile, there are, you know, literally dozens of other organizations that are altering how they deliver service right now. But I do know that there are options. I know River City is still functioning. I know that the Inn of the Good Shepherd is still functioning and using social distancing. So they've created more spaces in other areas as well to offer some kind of a shelter for people. excuse me, I know that Lambton Public Health and the Social Services Division are still working with clients at different levels. I know that the Sarnia Police Service, you know, who for some folks, you know, that's a scary phone call to have to make for various reasons and through various experiences of their own. That may be a difficult call to make, but I can also assure you that they're still there and they're still willing and able to help in all of the same ways that they were able to help before. What the path looks like to safety might change a little bit right now, but it's still very important that you make that first call, whether it is to the interval home, whether it is to, if you have a caseworker through social services. And if not, then make the call anyways and see if you can get some direction on there. So people are there willing to help. There are still people that are working hard and doing their jobs, often remotely, but they're still taking clients, whether it's from a mental health facility or otherwise, right? And as you say, the Women's Interval Home is still working with families and individuals to try and offer safety. But I agree with you. It scares the heck out of me to think about it, to imagine, and that's my experience as a young child. You know, abuse and addiction, and imagine what it would be like. I don't like to think about it, but I certainly try to put myself in other people's shoes as well. And the fear, it's just, that's not even a good word, the absolute terror of having to be stuck in that situation where work might have been your only safe place, where, you know, school for kids might be their only safe place, and now they're trapped at home with the unknown, right? The 9 a.m. drinking, the 11 p.m. drinking, the 4 a.m. blackouts or the 11 a.m. blackouts, you're just not knowing when the shoe is going to drop. I can only imagine how terrifying that is for people. And again, a lot of it goes back to the same advice as with wanting to quit drinking, because it very much is within you to have to reach out. That's the hard part. It's always been the hard part for an abused partner, an abused child, is unfortunately nobody else knows what you're going through. And the only way to step through that is to take the first step, and it's to find somebody, again, whether it's the police or a family member, a trusted friend, or a complete stranger that you've never met before, but you believe might be the one for whatever reason that will lead you to safety. But it is upon you, no matter what, to reach out. And that's hard, because it's really hard to do for people in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things in these unique times that we need to consider is that nobody's going to come, like your neighbor isn't going to come knock on your door now and create that distraction. It is ultimately up to you. And, you know, even though your partner, maybe, you know, there are things that you let go before, or, you know, we know the classic story of the push that turns to the punch, that turns to something worse. We need to realize we don't know how long this is going to last for. So
Yeah.
if you're seeing some things that are happening, that it's elevating, please don't wait to call. Don't wait until you get that punch in the face. And, you know, one of the things that with me in my youth going through a hard relationship, my aha moment was when I realized that one day I might have a horrible conversation with a woman that was dating my son, that my son, from seeing abuse, might turn around. And I just had like this flash of a woman saying, like, your son is punching me out, and me thinking, in this dysfunctional relationship, it's learned behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was for me. And for me, it was calling my dad, get me the heck out of here right now. And he did. And, you know, my life changed, my life turned a corner, and I had to have that moment. So isn't it interesting? I still wasn't caring about myself. My personal value was right down. Like, I was believing the things I was being told, but it was thinking about my son and possibly the mother of my grandchildren was the moment. I cared about them more than I cared about myself in that moment. So whatever it is that helps you have that aha moment of, I am worthy, I need to make the change, but don't wait. Like, you know, I'm so conscious of what this fallout is. And then, I mean, if your children are seeing that, and, you know, we talk about with, you know, youth trauma and limiting beliefs and all that. Well, what are we representing? Even, you know, with what we're teaching children about, you know, the virus and illness. And, you know, there's a lot of kids that are listening to all the conversation that are playing while the news is on, or we're responding to the news. I think these are all part of that, the mental illness, part of the way our own wellness is, you know, like, what are your thoughts on that family environment?
You know, in general, you know, especially when it comes to an abusive situation, you're absolutely right. There's that, I mean, there's a lifetime of scarring and trauma again, and that was my experience. So I speak from that. I speak to that from personal experience, and knowing the impact that had on me when I was 19, and some of these words would come out of my mouth in a blackout, and some of these, like, I don't know how to describe it other than like a surge of energy and rage and anger that had nothing to do with the person that I was speaking with, and it could have been a partner. It could have been a friend. I've come out of blackouts and had people ask me, why did you say those horrible things to that guy? Why did you, whatever? Why did you jump off a balcony? Why did you do all these, odd and dangerous things? And that's because those were the things that were embedded, and then as I grew up and grew to want out of that, thinking I don't want to hurt people. I didn't want to grow up and have that being the example for my own children, which was the primary motivation for me to quit drinking in the first place before myself, right? I wanted my kids to not have the same experience as I did. And I will just sort of detour for a second, because I think it's important to also address the person that's going through that as well. If you find yourself saying things that you are uncomfortable saying, if you find yourself having those thoughts and those tendencies and those outbursts that you find are inappropriate and uncomfortable, it's up to you as well to reach out and to try and find ways to manage that fear and that anger, because that stuff still all comes from somewhere. It's a lesser talked about subject, but oftentimes the people that are doing those acts, they don't want to do that either. There's something very broken. There's an illness. There's something that's triggered that has created that, and for those folks to get help, it's a much, I can't compare. It's also a very difficult path as well, and I just want to be sure that those people are addressed as well, because you can also get help before it gets to that point as well. So that's very important. But you're right, in these times right now, I can only imagine how traumatic this is for young people. It's traumatic for the grown-ups right now. We're all experiencing levels of fear and anxiety and stress that none of us could have ever imagined in our life. But fear and anxiety from an entirely different place. We can empathize and understand what it must be like to be in an abusive situation. We can empathize and understand what it must be like to maybe be in a war-torn country. But we're privileged in North America to think that we'd never be in a situation where we're going to be locked down and told what to do by the government, and to not have the freedoms that we were used to having. So this is very traumatizing for people. It's traumatizing for adults, and I can only imagine what the kids are going to grow up with. And maybe some of us have seen it with our own grandparents who went through a world war. Not the same, not necessarily a fair comparison, but really the only thing I can equate it to that happened on such a large scale. And if you've known a grandparent who lived through the war, like my grandfather did, he wasn't necessarily a functional human being in much of his adult years. He was scarred, he was traumatized, he didn't speak very much about those things, those feelings, so they bottled up until they came out in an unhealthy way. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm afraid of right now. So it's very important for us as parents, those of us who are parents, to find ways for us to manage our feelings and to manage our fears, manage our stress, whether that's eat as healthy as you can, go for a walk, surround yourself with positive people, so that when we're modeling with to our children, we're not necessarily modeling the worst case scenario all the time, because we will get through this, and it's important for us to understand that at every step of the way. So I agree with you, that family unit is so important right now in how we represent those roles that we have and how we're dealing with this.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, as you're saying about, people like our elders, and it makes me think of a lot of the seniors that are hoarders. It's from learned behavior, from living in lack in their younger years, right? So it's interesting how it can come out other ways. And a lot of times it's a matter of self-evaluation and asking yourself, like, one of the things that I try to follow is the acronym of THINK. So when I'm speaking, and it means I'm quiet a lot because I go through these things. So I ask myself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it informative? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And a lot of times it's the kind one that'll snag you up, because you'll say something, and even like, it might not have name calling or swear words, but even just simple things like, oh, is that what you're wearing tonight? And then you'll like, why did I say that? So Michele, why did you say that? Why did you make that one comment? What was I trying? Was I judging? Was I trying to bully them indirectly? It really is a great way to start that internal, looking at yourself and figuring out, like, what are my insecurities? Am I guided by love, or am I guided by fear? And quite often we're guided by fear. So if we can switch that around and realize that, we can use our words, they're so powerful, and we need to use them to lift each other up, which unfortunately is not a lot of what we're seeing on social media right now. A lot of what we're seeing, and I tell you, Brian, I think I'm erasing more stuff than I'm typing these days, because, right? I'm trying not to get involved. I'm trying not to, it's such an interesting thing, because you try not to get involved, but you want people to think outside the box, but not get involved in the conspiracy theories. And you want people to stay in, but you don't want them to stay in out of fear. You want them to stay in because it's common sense. Like, it's such a hard thing. You want people to source the stuff they're sharing. And it's okay. One of the things I tell my Weight Watcher members all the time is, it's okay to lose your shit. It's okay to, I don't say that officially when I'm working, but it's okay to have the breakdown, to have the cry, to punch the pillow, whatever. Just don't unpack your bags and live there, right? Let it get out of your system. So I think with the social media, we need to tread very carefully with what we're exposing ourselves to, but also what we're sharing, and realizing that everybody's isolation is a completely different experience. Are you finding the same thing, like in your social media?
Yeah, especially early on. And I know, I've had a few conversations about that, and I've, had to, I've got a fairly large reach, right? So a fairly large, diverse group of people who interact on my pages, and mostly my private one, my Councillor page, just kind of sits there right now, and I use it mostly just to share official stuff. I know a lot of people read it, but it's less interactive than my private page. So my private page, where I share a little bit more from a personal perspective as well as more official stuff. But I also read a ton of stuff, whether they're commenting on mine, but I'm scrolling my news feeds. I mean, I've got hours in a day that I didn't necessarily have, in my car, that are now mine to sit in my chair and drink coffee and read. And a lot of that is me trying to understand people. And especially early on, I was desperately trying to be open, as much as I was trying to push out the official message, and to help people recognize the seriousness of this, because that really was an issue. There were already people that were getting it, that already understood how serious it was, and were already on to the next step and the next level of depression and anxiety over self-isolation and all of that stuff. And meanwhile, you've got me saying, stay home, understand, stay home. So trying to understand that my level of privilege here, and let's be honest, it's hard to acknowledge that you have privilege, especially when you grew up being abused, and all the other stuff that I've lived through, and all the years of living paycheck to paycheck and all that kind of stuff that I suffered through, that most of us can relate to. That I still have a level of privilege, and through this, I've tried to be very sensitive with it, talk with my kids about that as well. Like we're some of the fortunate ones right now, because when we're being asked to isolate, we're being asked to isolate in a loving home, where, dad's with you, and dad's, quite frankly, I don't know, I'm kind of cool, I think. We have music instruments. I play video games with my son. We watch movies until the wee hours of the night. Like, I think we're doing okay. And so it's not as bad as it could be. But to somebody living alone, who did lose their job, that kind of constant reminder is very triggering. That, like, I'm doing everything I can. Why do you keep telling me? Without understanding that, also, because they're not capable in that moment, that these messages are meant for other people. So there is this sort of level, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, I think, but this level of mixed messaging that's coming out there that's impacting people very, very differently. And I've done my best to try and be sensitive to that, and to try and meet people where they're at. And sometimes that means private messaging people just as a check-in and things like that. So I know I sort of went off, so I think I'm just going to stop now and help you get us back on track.
And that's okay. And you know what? I think there's so much value in that, because, and this isn't even just with everything going on. I see people post things, and a lot of it's younger generation, but not always. But I always think to myself, like, really, do you want your grandma reading that? Like, if you've got 200 friends or 2,000 friends, do they need to know that you're fighting with your ex? Do they need to know that you went to Temptations and bought a new bong? That is a terrible idea. Why are you putting that on? Not judging the bong. I'm saying grandma doesn't need to know. I think your coworkers don't need to know. So, quite often we're not thinking that, and we're not realizing that Facebook is not Dear Diary. They're two completely different things. So, there was one post that was really serious about the virus floating around the last couple of days. And so my suggestion was, if you feel that there's somebody that really needs that wake-up call, I get it. We all know that person, but you're right. Private message them. Like, there's other ways to do it so that we can be more compassionate, because the reality is that the suicide hotlines are very, very busy right now. And so there's that part of it where people are feeling desperate, they're alone, they're not reaching out because they're scared. Maybe they feel that we live, in a hopeless, uncontrolled world. And if you feel like that if you contract that virus, it's a death sentence, which is not actual fact. There's a lot of people that have survived. I just posted that we've had 47 people in Sarnia that recover. Let's hold on to that happy thought. I'm not saying deny. There's a big difference between being positive and being naive. You need to know what's going on, but not dwell on it. So, when you're sharing that sort of stuff, I think you need to realize that there is that person that's sitting at home all by themselves. I saw a post that really made me think, and it was a girl that was concerned for a friend, and her friend lives alone and is so scared she won't go out and even go get groceries. And the friend who was posting out of concern was feeling sort of lost, didn't know what to do. Like, I need to do a wellness check on my friend. I'm concerned because they won't even go and get the things they need. What do I do? The police must be busy. How do I handle that scenario? And that's a very real thing, especially now you've got two people that are anxious. You got the person stuck in their apartment, and then you've got the friend who cares, who's anxious, but they shouldn't go knock on the door because you're not supposed to do that, but they're both self-isolating. Like, and I know there's no, one standard answer, but like, what are your thoughts on that scenario in these times?
It's one of those things where if I pull in some, DBT skills, so dialectical behavior therapy, the it's the concept that two things can be true at once, right? So it's very important for that person to understand that the well-being of somebody else, ultimately, the outcome of that, whichever way it goes, isn't on you. It's not your responsibility, number one, because it's really important to not to own the outcome, especially if it happens to be unfortunate. But on the other hand, it is up to you. So this is where two things can be true at the same time. You don't own that. It's not your journey. It's not your path. But on the other hand, if you're the one that's there and able to help, then you can do everything in your power to help that person, then you should. And that is maybe making a phone call to the police to do a wellness check. That's what they're there for. And now more than ever, which is why it's so important for us to listen to the instructions of the emergency orders and to not tie up police in any other way if we can at all help it, to ensure that the healthcare services are there for people, to make sure that the frontline responders, the first responders, are there and available for us. So if we do want to send a police officer, then make that phone call. If we can't reach that person through phone or private messaging or any other way, they're not responding, then quite frankly, I can't see any other way to get to that person. So it is very critically important that we understand that those resources are still there and available to us. And it's perfectly okay to do that. And I've had to make wellness checks through, that path before. And it doesn't necessarily feel great to do that, but at the same time, it's you have very limited superpowers as a human being. I always like to remind myself that when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the burden of the knowledge that I have about some people and my inability to help them. I have very limited superpowers, but it doesn't mean I can't do everything within my powers to help. So if I've exhausted my options, then unfortunately, it is a phone call to the police. It is a phone call to a family member, an employer, somebody you think that could break through and reach that person.
Awesome. Very good. And so, the thing is too, is your peace of mind after that. So, the person might be upset that you did it or whatever the fallout is, but the police will give them phone numbers and tools to help them through, and you're going to have the peace of mind. I can't imagine staying up all night worrying because my brother's not answering the phone, or, somebody that's usually online all the time. Maybe they put some disturbing posts up and then all of a sudden they disappear. We've all seen that, and that puts you in a full-fledged panic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's good to know. And even if you're in this scenario as well of, maybe you're in an apartment building and you're hearing what you think is some abuse in other apartments, don't be scared to make the call. I mean, you can do it anonymously, right? But it's all about making sure that those people are safe and healthy, and they know that they have those options as well. Because again, we don't want to feel trapped, and we don't want, record negative fallout from all these things, right? We're worried about keeping the people that get the virus safe and have them, live through this. We want the other people stuck at home that are living through it as well. So I think we've covered some really good stuff. So if you're dealing with addiction, you can look up, call out or do shout outs to your friends and family, to your sponsor if you're already on the program, go through, Zoom or Facebook. Another thing I just want to mention briefly, as far as, making sure we are following valid sources for our information. And a lot of I have a Facebook page, Sarnia Rocks. And so you've been doing your council meetings on Zoom. And so I've been sharing that on the Sarnia Rocks page. So I definitely invite people to make sure that they're tapping into pure, legit sources. Like you have that one doctor that I don't know his name, but he deals with the patients here in Sarnia Lambton that's been speaking to the council, right?
Yeah. Dr. Renaday, our medical officer of health. And again, you can't ask for a better source of information than the one who's directly dealing with oversight of our public health system here in the community, who is also dealing with all of the other medical officers of health all the way up to the top level with the province. So again, great source of information, either through the County of Lambton page, Lambton Public Health's page, the City of Sarnia's page, and all of those links are readily shared and often available through Facebook and other social media platforms as well. So if you do have any doubts as well, it's also important just to ask, just to reach out and ask if you have any questions. Even the hotline, I know it's been treated like it has one purpose, but there's a hotline for the City of Sarnia that can also be an information opportunity for you as well. You can make a phone call, leave a message, and get a call back with appropriate information as well, or just reach out to one of us on council.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, good. Because even other things like people have been wondering, because people are doing spring cleaning and they're stuck at home, can you put more garbage out now? You know, about the big garbage pickup, that's canceled for right now. And just little things like that, like go to a true source. Don't just put it out on Facebook. Asking my 2,000 friends what they think, right? Because then it turns into a whole nother thing, going right to the source, which is awesome. So one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about, whether it's officially or non-officially, is different things that we can do to keep ourselves busy, keep ourselves in a good mindset. So I've been recommending, puzzles, card games, Netflix, some positive Netflix stuff. What else? Meditation, reading. What have you been recommending to people, Brian, to keep them in the right mindset?
Well, I'm a big proponent of fitness for mental wellness. I regularly work out, and I pro wrestle as well, and there's lots of things that I'm missing right now too, and I know that a lot of other people are missing that. But the reason I ever got into fitness in the first place was because I needed another outlet for my mental wellness. I appreciated what it did for my brain when I was exercising, and it's as simple as a walk. At this point, it doesn't have to be some online program, although I've shifted my workout routines to DDPY, which is a sort of a Diamond Dallas Page's pro wrestler created this sort of yoga inspired program with a 1 month free membership. So I tried it. I'd already been using it in person and training for wrestling, but to do it from home was a different step for me. So that for me was a nice step forward, was to find some kind of an online routine, something that would keep me accountable, give me a regularly scheduled exercise to do, because the days and then the weeks can fly by when you're losing track of time like this. I do daily walks with my kids, and I recommend that for people as well constantly. So my kids and I do at least 1 or 2 long walks a day, for sure 1, but if it's a beautiful day, we'll do 2. And I might go out for a 3rd on my own and just put my headphones in and listen to some music. And that's another thing, I've been rediscovering music again that I hadn't listened to for years and years and years, playing my guitar a little bit more. Again, as you say, puzzles, games, things that are meaningful to you. I have lots of nostalgia with a lot of different things that made me feel safe and well as a young person. I'm going back to them, so I'm picking up the guitar and I'm picking up the bass and playing it more. I'm listening to some of my favorite old music that helped me feel hopeful, inspired when I was a teenager, and allowed me to dream. I can put those songs into my headphones and go for a walk and still dream and feel inspired and hopeful without even recognizing that that's what it's doing. So there's a lot of comfort. If cooking is a comfort for you, or was, and you gave it up because of this fast-paced world that we live in, what better time than to rediscover some of your favorite old recipes, or the joy of kneading dough and other things as well. So my son and I are going to make pie crust from scratch in about an hour. And of all the cooking I've done and worked in restaurants and run restaurants, I've never actually made pie crust. So I'm looking forward to a new challenge.
Right? There you go. There you go. And that's a positive, because we can evolve and grow from these new experiences. And I love the cooking one because that's helping boost your immune system, right? I think a lot of our immune system being knocked down is so much processed food. And this is like a whole nother talk for another time, but you know, the processed food and all that stuff. So seeing people going through and pulling out grandma's recipe and trying all that stuff, and people looking for yeast is a good thing. I really do, you know.
Yeah.
That's a great problem to have, that we're running out of that. And it's funny because I've started a Zoom platform where we do a meeting every Saturday night, and it's just for anybody who's interested. There's no charge. Last night I did trivia. So I had these cards, brain buster cards, and there was, I think, 12 or 13 of us, 4 or 5 I knew, and I just did trivia, and I had an imaginary prize that was about this big that I gave the winner. Last week we did Name That Tune, and I did, the one song I did was the first album I ever bought myself with my babysitting money, and it was Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. So,
Sweet.
right? So getting back into, yeah, that feel-good music that's empowering, not the Debbie Downer stuff, no offense to any Debbies, you know, but focusing on stuff that lifts you up, makes you feel good. I think those are all essential parts of getting through this together with the best mindset, and remembering that we don't have to let our thoughts run on default. We have the power to think on purpose. And I realize, you know, once you're in that mindset, I often say in some of the talks that I do, you know, if you're on a big hill with your car and it starts to roll at the top, it's a lot easier to catch it at the beginning than you'll never catch it at the bottom. It's going to run you right down, right? So when we start to feel negative, or just letting our thoughts go to no man's land, where sometimes you have to ask yourself, is what I'm saying even true? You know, if we can control that at the beginning and start listening to that good music, or put a TED Talk on, or whatever it is that makes you feel good. YouTube has a lot of great videos with exercise and yoga and meditations, all that sort of thing. So I think those are all great ways to help tap into your better self. You know, I feel part of me is really excited. Like I've been self-isolating since the beginning of March. So I feel like I'm almost a pro at this now. Weight Watchers was one of the first companies I know of to go completely virtual. And so, you know, I think a new normal is going to come out of this, and I hope people have reconnected and maybe, like, I'm saving a fortune, not going through Tim Hortons, not going through the drive-thrus. So, you know, looking at those positives and realizing that, like, it's a new world that's coming out of this, and it might be really exciting, you know, thinking about, although I've been washing my hands for years, but thinking about, you know, the positive relationships, and maybe doing some videos with people that we hadn't talked about before, you know, or talked to in a long time, that sort of stuff. So a lot of positives. So before we break here, I just want to show a slide that just has the suicide phone numbers in case you need to, so you can see it here. If you're feeling suicidal or you're concerned about someone else who may be, it's the Lambton Mental Health Crisis Service and the Sarnia Lambton Distress Line. So you can also go to the Sarnia Lambton Suicide Prevention website, and you can get a lot of information and a lot of help. And I'm pleased to say, not even just if it's for yourself personally, but in that scenario where you're talking to somebody online, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if you're not trained how to handle this stuff, it's always good to get some help if you can't necessarily get them to call for themselves. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I've gone through this so many times that it's very important. Again, it goes back to that DBT thinking I referred to before, that the root of that for me is that none of us are trained at this. Well, some of us are. I'm not. I've just been around it a lot, and I've gone through a lot of stuff, so I can draw on resources that I know other people can't. But ultimately, if I'm not a trained counselor, I'm not a trained counselor, and I can't pretend to be one, even in the most difficult times. I can simply do everything that I can do within my power, and the same as you. So I think it's very important that we recognize that and do our best to refer people off to those who are more appropriate to help in those situations, for sure.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for taking the time. It looks like the sun's trying to come out. My room is all, I'm half dark, half not dark. But taking the time to join me today, and I think we have a very important message. And I hope people got some stuff from it, and we can follow up, with more information. So when I post this video, I'll make sure that I put some more links and that sort of thing in the subjects. So thank you again, and have a great day, and happy baking today.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me and for doing this. It's a real gift to the community. So I just want to let you know how much I appreciate it as well.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Brian. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.